The goal of this video is to teach you how to draw the brachial plexus without having to rely on truly understanding what it all means. There are many different tricks and mnemonics to remember how to actually draw the plexus, and this is just what I developed after learning many different ways as a system that worked for me while I was learning. You can break down drawing the plexus into 7 different steps of 3s. The first step is to draw 3 Ys. Some people say the 3 wise men as a way to remember that. Then draw 3 divisions. People remember this as strikes over spares or an X over a slash. And then you break it down into 5 different groups of 3 nerves. First, you have 3 root branches that join to become the long thoracic. Then 3 more root branches. And then 3 nerves for each of the wise men. The top Y gets a root off the trunk, and cord. The middle Y gets 3 off the cord. And the bottom Y gets 3 off the cord as well. And the final step, you look at the plexus, try and figure out what you're missing, and you're missing M for median. So let's get started. First, you start by drawing the 3 Ys, or the 3 wise men, and label these as C5, C6, C7, C8, and T1. The separation of roots, trunks, divisions, cords, and branches is something to eventually learn and understand, but at this point, don't worry about it, it's just included for completeness sake. Next, you draw your 3 divisions as strikes over spares, so you draw the X up top, and then draw 1 slash for the spare, but knowing which way the slash goes is very important because this dictates which roots eventually end up as which terminal branches. Think about the plexus in terms of proximal to distal. The one on the left, the slash from the spare combines with one of the slashes from the strike to make an arrow in the direction that the nerves travel. Whereas the image on the right makes an arrow going opposite direction that the nerves travel. So obviously the one on the left is the one that we remember to be correct, whereas the one where the arrow goes in the opposite direction is incorrect. So here we have our strike over spare pointing a direction that the nerves travel from proximal to distal, which gives us our divisions. Next, we go to our 5 different groups of 3 nerves each. Our first group of 3 is 3 root branches, which all combine to form one long nerve. Then we do 3 more branches off the roots, 2 off the top, 1 off the bottom, so 2 at C5 and 1 off of T1. And then the next 3 groups are all sets of 3 off of each of the initial wise men, or each of the initial Y. So 3 nerves off the top Y go off the trunk cord, all of which are pointing up. 3 off the bottom Y are all cord going down. And 3 in the middle are also off the cord, but these, since they're in the middle, half up, half down. So either up, down, down. That doesn't really matter, but this feeds into a mnemonic later on. And lastly, we sit and look at our plexus and figure out what we missed, and what we're missing is a big ol' M for median nerve at the end. There we have our complete plexus. So now to start filling them in, the best way that I always did was to start with the most forgettable, nerve to subclavius. I bet you didn't even know we had a subclavius muscle, much less a nerve to it, so easy to forget, so try and remember that one first. Next, to name the terminal branches, some people remember mamru for musculocutaneous, axillary, median, radial, or ulnar. Trained in the Marmu school of thought, which works well. It sacrifices symmetry in favor of remembering that the axillary and radial are kind of together, but whether you're Marmu, Mamru, either way, that names all the branches. Then, if you remember that we drew that one long nerve, that long nerve becomes the long thoracic. When naming one of the C5 roots, if you remember learning that C3 through 5 keeps the diaphragm alive, it's easy to remember that that branch goes to the phrenic nerve. Similarly, when thinking about T1, remember that T1 is the first rib, therefore it's the first level with an intercostal, so that root goes off to be a branch to the intercostal. Suprascapular comes next. It's off the superior trunk. And if you think of the plexus in terms of proximal to distal, one of the most proximal muscles of the upper extremity limb is going to be around the scapula. So think suprascapular comes early, and it's off the superior trunk. Next, we have to remember where to put the medial pectoral nerve and where to put the lateral pectoral. And if you remember what the cords are named at this level, it's very easy. But if you don't quite remember that there's also a medial brachial cutaneous nerve and a medial anabrachial cutaneous nerve. So we have a group of 3 things that all start with medial, and the only lateral thing we can remember is the lateral pectoral. So obviously this group of 3 off that bottom looking cord are all going to be the medial pectoral, medial brachial cutaneous, and medial anabrachial cutaneous. So if this is the medial pectoral, and you remember that the other one's the other one, then that has to be the lateral pectoral. And now we have the names of the lateral cord and medial cord, which if you had memorized to begin with, you wouldn't have had to do the little trick of 3. But again, this is an iterative process. Looking at the 3 branches that come off of the posterior cord, we remember drawing one going up and one going down. The whole purpose of that mnemonic was to remind you of upper subscap and lower subscap. So now we have 2 different nerves left that we're trying to name. There's a bunch of different named nerves in the plexus that are easy to mix up. You have your long thoracic, thoracodorsal, dorsal scapular. And all these names kind of go from one to the next to the next. So if we already started with our long thoracic, going from bottom to top, we know next comes thoracodorsal. And then going from middle on up, and dorsal scapular. So again, these names all go from one to the next, and that's how you name them from bottom to middle to top. Long thoracic, thoracodorsal, dorsal scapular. And that's it. We've named everything in the plexus. So let's do it one more time, filling it in as we go. Again, to review, drawing the plexus is 7 different steps of 3. First drawing 3 Ys, then 3 divisions, strikes over spares, and then 5 different groups of 3 nerves. 3 off the roots to become the long thoracic, 3 more root branches, and then 3 nerves for each of the wise men, going on top, trunk, cord, and then on middle and bottom, all cord. Lastly, putting a big M for median. So we draw our 3 wise men, label them C5 through T1, draw our 3 division lines as strikes over spares, making sure that the spare goes in the direction from proximal to distal, same direction that the nerves travel, and not going the opposite direction. So we've got our strikes over spare to form our anterior and posterior divisions, and then 5 groups of 3 nerves, with the first 3 being C5 through 7 as one long nerve, being named the long thoracic. Then 3 more root branches, 2 off top, 1 off the bottom, being the dorsal scapular, phrenic, and first intercostal. Then 3 more off the top as trunk cord, being subclavius, easy to forget, so you better remember it. Suprascapular, starting superiorly off the superior trunk, and then the lateral pectoral off the lateral cord. Then we have our middle, all off the cord as well. Again, one's going up, one's going down, because those are the upper and lower subscap, and then the thoracodorsal in the middle. And then 3 off of our medial cord, which are called the medial pectoral, medial brachial cutaneous, and medial anabrachial cutaneous. And then for our last step, we're looking to see what we forgot. And we forgot a big ol' M, and then a big ol' M for median nerve to finish out our mamru or marmu, depending on what you prefer. So that's it. That's the entire plexus. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any ways that I could improve this lecture, please go to tinyurl.com/drhfeedback. It's an anonymous way to tell me how to change this lecture to make it more helpful in the future. Thank you for your feedback, and I hope this was helpful.